Jolinda Stevens here. I'm with Senator Maralyn Chase. She's a Unitarian Universalist. She serves the 32nd District, which is in the Shoreline area. And I've known her for 30 years, not that either of us admit to that, of course. Senator Chase has been a legislator for 13 years, serving the 32nd District, and she has a lot of experience. And so um, we'd like her thoughts on the budget battle that's shaping up. And if any significant changes are going to happen in revenue, they're going to happen because of the Senate. So, how do you see the chances of new, more equitable revenue being enacted in this session?
I think that we will have some um, new revenue because we have McCleary. And McCleary, it's going to cost us about $4 billion that we have actually engaged in what I call deferred spending, or so there will be some. I don't know how much. Um, Certainly not as much as I would like to see, but there'll be some new revenue. The big fight's going to be to make sure that we make no further cuts in the social safety net, because that would be an easy way for people to say, oh, well, we can go get some of that money. And in fact, we can't. Since the recession started in '07 um, and really hit us hard from '08 on, we have cut $12 billion out of the budget. And a lot of that came out of the safety net. And if we don't want people starving in the streets, we can't cut anymore. And and yet our paramount duty is to educate the children in our state, and we will have to do that. The Supreme Court's kind of watching to see what we will do. There are differences of opinion on um, how much we need to pass and appropriate if we're going to have at least a full down payment on that $4 billion bill. So it's going to be hard. People are now laughing. If we get out of here by August, it'll be a miracle. And the reason why we will have that kind of long session is that we have fundamental disagreement on how we raise revenue, and you see it on what I think is interesting, a way to illustrate this fundamental disagreement. We have a prevailing wage, and there are a lot of us, that you have to pay a decent living wage to people who work for the government. We're trying to get uh, minimum wage increased to $15. There are all these things. We want to increase wages. There's a really good economic argument behind that. Our tax system is built on consumers spending discretionary money on items on which they pay sales tax. If a shopper has enough money to go shopping, to buy washing machines and cars and all, they will pay sales tax on that, and the business from which they buy the item will also pay B&O tax. Those taxes will go into our general fund to meet our obligations. But as you can see, there's a huge push for what we call a race to the bottom, to lower the wages that people receive. For me, it's not a matter of justice of a prevailing wage or a living wage. It is a matter of that's the system we have. And if we don't have workers and working families with enough money to be able to go out and generate sales tax, we have a broken system. And we have the distinction of having the worst tax system in the entire United States. Low income working families pay 17, almost 17%, 16.9% of their income in taxes. That is simply not fair. But aside from an analysis of justice and fairness of our tax system, the fact is we cannot meet our constitutional responsibilities. So we're going to fight about that. And when I say fight about it, we've got the Democrats digging in on no more sales tax, which is another regressive tax, and we have the Republicans digging in on no income tax. So we have a standoff. So I don't know how it's ultimately going to come about, except that I do know we need the help of citizens to inform themselves on what the nature of this tax system is and how important it is that we have a lot of people in our state walking around, going shopping, walking into our brick and mortar businesses and buying items, you know. And
Mhm.
so if we can get a lot of people out shopping, we should be able to meet our constitutional responsibilities. And Jolinda, I know you love that, but it's true.
Well, so there were two somewhat less regressive taxes proposed this session.
Mm-hmm.
One is cap and trade,
Right.
and the other is the capital gains tax.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you see any hope that either one of those, because it's not just that the sales tax is regressive, it's also old economy. It's becoming less and less
Oh, sure.
effective for us.
Yeah, people shop on the internet. They shop in catalogs. They shop online, and we don't get any sales tax from those sales. So that's one question. Okay, um, we can talk about cap and trade, and then capital gains. Let's talk about capital gains first. Okay, when we talk about personal income, there are three components of personal income. One is we get a paycheck. So we sell our labor and we get a paycheck. So it's from our labor. The second component of personal income is income from property, like stocks and bonds or rents. You don't do anything to earn that money. You have property that earns money for you. And then the third one is what we call transfer payments. Those are retirement payments, money that is paid from other taxpayers or funds that transfer the money. You People who are retired don't pay those taxes. I say leave those retired people alone. They don't have that much money anyway. But the over the years since 1969, we have been charting the growth of the income earned from labor, selling your labor, or the income earned from property. The income that the state receives and the people receive from selling their labor is going down, while the income from property is increasing. And as a component of personal income, it looks like, these are not usually aggregated out. So it looks like people are making good money here. But that's not true because you have all of this property income that just added into the bigger category of personal income. So you think, oh, the people of Washington are doing really well, when in fact that's not true. So we have to figure out, how do we tax the ever increasing personal income from property? We if we had and you could say, by the way, that well, those people who earn money from property, they go out and buy stuff. They're consumers, but how many pair of jeans can they buy? How many cars can they buy? There is a limit to their consumption, and after they reach that limit, they still have all of this income from property. And a capital gains tax, they don't pay capital gains tax, but a capital gains tax would mean you pay not for the full value of the property that you own, but from the gain of that property over the taxing period. So that would capture that component of personal income. I think that's a fair tax. I recall Bill Gates Sr., who, when we in 19, no, it was 2001, I think, we had a tax study here, and he pointed out that there are people who are very wealthy living on property income, but they have the security of their ownership because of the laws and the enforcement mechanisms that we as a society have adopted. And that if they were in the middle of the desert with none of the social protections for their property, how long do you think they would hold it? Not very long. So they need to pay for that. So there is justice, I think, in asking them to pay on the capital gains on their property, the gains in value on their property, or the gains in revenue from their property. Um, so that would take care. I think that's a fair tax. The cap and trade tax. Um, I think that there are some problems with the cap and trade. The cap and trade tax was set up for two reasons. Well, you go back to Initiative 937. It was set up to try to deal with this issue of climate change. And we have um, we have a lot of hydropower. We don't, we're producing very small amounts of greenhouse gas, um, and so when you think about it, 937 required people to, after we're paying, they have to, providers of electricity have to provide 3% of their load, which amount is the full demand on their system, in renewable energy. We're going to go shortly to 6% of their load has to be renewable energy, and then a few years beyond that, I think 2019, I think it is, it'll go up to 15, 16%. When we passed the 937, the load projections for the need for energy went up in kind of a line like this. We expected greater demands on energy than what has happened. Our load demand actually has gone, instead of this high projection, it's gone down a lower projection. So there's not that much demand for energy usage. So if you don't need to buy more power, if your existing power sources are sufficient for you, you don't need to go out and buy additional power. But we are requiring people to buy renewable energy credits. And we have a lot of dams here, and people who have paid into, say, any of the dams, they buy their power from the dams, some of the PUDs. Um, and then they also have to pay for the upgrades on the turbines. But that does not count towards their requirements for renewable energy credits. So they go somewhere else. They have to go to Idaho or someplace to buy eligible renewable energy credits. So the money leaves our state. The other thing we have is we've got a lot of wind power. And quite frankly, the companies who have the wind power, they're foreign companies, um, did a great deal of the financing of 937, along with some other people. And then Congressman Inslee helped fund it substantially. Um, but when you look at them, they have made about I think $8 billion in investment. But they're going to take all of that investment out. They made it very clear they're in business to make money, and that's fine. But if we don't need that power right now, we're powering most of that power is being sent to California, and so you look at that. So it's going to California, um, and yet we are required to make sure that they have enough money to be able to get their return on investments. It's if the wind doesn't blow, they still have contracts in California, so they crank up the gas engines. We need to have a fundamental look at all of this. But what would happen, for example, if instead of buying RECs, say from Idaho, where they still have a greater demand, what would happen if we invested in conservation, the cheapest form of energy, and if we were to say fix grandma's house as an example, put some insulation in there, put new windows in that don't leak, keep her warm, um, and lower her energy bill, and then allow that conservation to be a source of renewable energy credits. So instead of going elsewhere and trying to buy renewable energy credits for power we don't need, invest it in our own people, keep that money at home. So that would really help a lot of people. We'll see. We'll see. So these are fights that we're having about these issues.
So, in addition to the House and Senate leadership,
Uh-huh.
where should we be concentrating our lobbying efforts to see that we protect the social safety net, maybe restore some of those cuts, and get capital gains tax passed?
You know what I think is we really need to do? We need to set up a dog and pony show, what I call a dog and pony
Mm-hmm.
show, so we could go out to our neighborhoods and explain to people how our tax system really works. that it's built on all of us becoming consumers. That we're never going to have economic recovery until we have more consumers. And I think people would be shocked because none of us like to think of ourselves as labeled just a consumer. But from a tax perspective, we are. We have to go buy stuff. And those of us who believe in living simply don't go buy stuff. So we're not really doing our part to bring about economic recovery. But so be it. And those of us who like my favorite department store, Goodwill,
Hmm.
if we shop there, we pay a sales tax, but we're not paying nearly what we would pay if we were going to say Nordstrom's or Macy's or one of the bigger stores. Um, I think the greatest impediment to to tax reform and solving our budget issues is the fact that most of the citizens of this state do not understand our tax system as it currently operates. And they don't want an income tax because they think they'll be taxed even higher. But in fact, the few of us who are still working, and we can talk about that, um, are paying a terrible tax burden. And we should be yelling, we want tax relief because
Yeah.
that's really what we want. We want tax relief for the people who are paying the bill because these people who have a lot of money are not paying the bill,
Right.
you know, and uh, and so you figure out, okay, if we had everyone in our state understanding the tax structure, we would have no problem whatsoever in getting an income tax.
Okay. We've um, we've actually reached the end of my technology in
Oh,
terms of time. Thank you very much for your time and for all of your good ideas. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
very welcome.